It's time for the Volquest podcast, where we dissect the biggest news items of the week.
Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast on a Tuesday with plenty going on as we head into the month of December here. Of course, the podcast brought to you by our friends at Smoky Mountain Organics, East Tennessee's most trusted health and wellness store, focusing on natural products and organic remedies to a variety of ailments. You can check them out online at SmokyMountainOrganics.com, or you can visit one of their 4 locations in East Tennessee, including the Knoxville location, which is right across from Trader Joe's. If you visit them in store, be sure and mention Volquest to them, and you'll get 15% off your total purchase in store. That is Smoky Mountain Organics, East Tennessee's most trusted health and wellness store. With Austin Price and Rob Lewis, I'm Brent Hobbs. Glad to have you along with us on this Tuesday edition of the podcast. Austin, Tennessee finishes the season with 7 wins. That's something we all expected. What is your overriding takeaway from this football season as Tennessee heads into bowl preparations and a bowl game? Obviously, there's a chance to win another game, but just looking at the regular season from, really overriding arc from Josh Heupel's first 7-8 months on the job, what's your biggest takeaway from this fall?
Well, for me, it's just that, these kids kind of bought into what Coach Heupel and company preached. We said the whole time, hey, you can't build everything off of playing home run derby and dodgeball and all that stuff. But it was something that mattered because I think the kids bought into that. Jabari Small, when he was out for, I believe it was the locker room a couple of weeks ago, said that, the first padded practice was a huge eye opener for him. Just how they coached, the way they coached, and I took that to mean like, they coached them up. They were hard on them, but they weren't harsh on them. Like, there was a level of loving to it as well. So I think that was a change for several guys that were here pre-coaching change and then post-coaching change. And like I said, just the buy-in. Those kids, to this point, have done anything that the staff need them to do as a collective unit.
Rob, what's your overriding takeaway from this regular season? Again, I know there's a bowl game to play, so it's not like the season's gone to bed, but what's your overriding takeaway from this fall?
I just think that it's hard not to look at this year and not feel like Tennessee's headed in the right direction. Definitively, not like you kind of think they are, not like, you can twist some things around and make an argument that they are. I mean, based on the body of work, it feels like they're headed in the right direction. They beat, we've all talked about it. They beat the 4 teams that you've got to beat if you're Tennessee. You got to establish that you're a better pro than Kentucky, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, Missouri. That has to happen. They did that. I can't remember. The Kentucky game was a close one. The other 3 were just abject blowouts. And, they're clearly not ready to stand toe-to-toe with Alabama and Georgia yet, but at different, that's a 1 touchdown game against Alabama. They had the lead on Georgia in the first half. You could see progress there. It's still, there's still a lot of distance to be made up, but you get the feeling that maybe you have a guy and a staff here now that it's really kind of just about recruiting.
Is that vibe more prevalent because they were such an offensive, successful team?
Yes, in my opinion,
compared to a team that played really good defense in their first year. Is it easier to have that feeling that things are in the right direction when you're going to, likely set a record for points by a Tennessee offense when you factor in the bowl game? Rob?
That's a hard yes for me. And I don't think it's just because of Tennessee scoring points. I think it's when you're, somebody that follows college football, you look around the landscape, you're not winning with defense anymore. Georgia may prove to be an exception this year, maybe. That's yet to be determined. But you look at Alabama last year, LSU the year before. Those are teams averaging 40-plus points a game, which, even golly, Hubbard, 10, 15 years ago, I have to go back and look at the numbers, but I think that's probably unprecedented in this conference.
Well, and don't you think too that coaching changes happen because teams can't score versus coaching changes happening because they can't stop anybody? if you can't stop anybody, you go get a different defensive coordinator in most cases, right? But if you can't score and you don't have an offensive plan going the right direction, then generally you change your head coach. Because
I think that's pretty much the way college football is now, and everybody's going for an offensive hire. Like you very rarely see, a defensive hire. If Oklahoma, hiring Venables potentially, that would be one. Obviously, when Tennessee hired Jeremy Pruitt, that was a defensive hire. But the way LSU's always been playing as a program has been defensive. But after 2 years ago, don't you think they're going to want an offensive guy with their hire? I mean, I do. I mean, most places want points, and when you can find somebody that can score them, you better hold on to them because it's harder to find than you think it is.
Yeah, and I think Rob, I think Danny White said it best when he stood up at the podium. There's something to be said for playing an exciting brand of football, even if that means it's a 52-48 game every now and then. There's something to be said for creating enthusiasm by the style of play. Yeah,
I mean, there was at one point in the second. I mean, this is an anomaly because they had a couple of really big plays, but at one point in the second half, Tennessee had the ball twice, had run 7 plays midway through the third quarter, averaging 20 yards a play. Yeah. That's fun. I mean,
yeah, and that's the bottom line. Is it is an entertainment. There is an entertainment value to it. I mean, obviously you want to win every game, but winning games 17-10 or 13-10 in this day of college football is just not what it is. And it's why you see rules set up for offenses to be successful and to make it harder on defenses, right? I mean, nobody enjoyed the NFL Sunday night game that was 16-10 or 16-13 or whatever that thing finished. Everybody wants to see people scoring 38 and 40 points the way Tennessee has done the bulk of this year. For Tennessee to continue to score, they've got to keep the quarterback play going. What's your takeaway from Hendon Hooker's comments post-game? In fact, he didn't go through the senior day. I mean, look, everybody's going to read into everything, Rob, but what do you take away from him saying, I'll do something when the time's right? Is that he's really deep diving into making a decision here, or do you think that he just is that there'll be news sooner rather than later, I guess?
I think he's deep diving. I mean, I think he's going to wait until January, and this is just me. I mean, but just being around him, he seems very methodical, very meticulous, about the way he approaches playing the position, preparing to play in games. I can't imagine that he's not going to treat a huge decision like this the same way, gather a ton of information. His dad was in the college game. I'm sure he knows, people at different levels that they can get feedback from. And then I think he'll wait and get a feel from the NFL advisory committee about, where he is, where he's viewed draft wise, and kind of weigh that against how much he feels like he could improve his stock by coming back and putting up monster numbers in this in this trick offense.
All right, Hubs, how would you, or you too, Rob, how would you compare him? Like, what NFL guy would you compare Hendon Hooker to?
I think he's like Josh Dobbs. I think he may be a little bit better passer and maybe not quite as explosive as a runner.
Hubs?
To a guy who's on a roster playing?
Yeah. I've got my one in mind. I just want to see if you match up.
Wow, I don't know. That's a great question. Who do you have in mind? I hadn't really thought about it that way.
Well, I'll keep the fact he came from Virginia Tech. Tyrod Taylor is kind of where I would, throw similar throwing motion.
Yeah, I would say Tyler. I'd say Tyrod's a little more explosive athletically in terms of.
I think he's got a bigger arm too.
In terms of some quickness, but that, I mean, it's an interesting It's an interesting thought because you look at the NFL and it's a great question also because it's Hendon Hooker is the next who, right?
Sure.
The next who is the next what? I mean, he's not the next Russell Wilson. I mean, he's the next what?
I think he's kind of maybe a poor man's Jalen Hurts.
I think he throws it a little better than Jalen Hurts.
And doesn't run it as good.
Yeah. Jalen Hurts had a hard time, which, I mean, because the NFL has, because the NFL maybe doesn't have anybody really to compare him to, does that hurt him in the NFL's eyes? I don't know. We'll see. The quarterback position is so different. I mean, you're watching Lamar Jackson play there. I mean, how many balls did he throw underhanded Sunday night? I mean, he's
it's a part of his repertoire.
Right. I mean, and the game is so different in terms of quarterback play now than what it used to be, and so it will be fascinating to see what the NFL thinks of him and where he compares and where he is slotted, where they think he's slotted round wise, and what the pecking order is for him.
Where did Dobbs go? Third, fourth?
I think third round. I think he was a third round pick of the Steelers.
I mean, I think if Hooker gets told that he's a third or fourth round pick, he's out of here.
Yeah, the one thing is, and the timing doesn't add up for Hendon this way. He probably needs the Senior Bowl to really help his stock. But if he's going to the Senior Bowl, he's got to make that decision now. You can't make the decision for the Senior Bowl in late January or early January, because those spots are going to fill up. So that's why I wonder about his timing a little bit. But I get the sense that he's going to do a deep dive at things, and I got the sense from Josh Heupel that there's going to be a lot of transparency with Josh Heupel about where it's at. It's not just going to be a recruiting pitch to keep him, Austin, because I mean his quote about making sure everybody understands what it takes at the next level, but helping guys make the best decision for them at that time is more than just a, hey, we want you to come back. I thought Cedric Tillman's was much more of, hey, you need to come back here. You know what I mean? I thought that was a little bit more of a harder recruiting pitch by Josh Heupel in his postgame. Maybe I misread it, but that's the way I took from it.
No, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, they've had conversations,
Sure.
I mean, Jerome Carvin had conversations with Coach Heupel already. I mean, they've been talking,
Sure.
And again, it's smart for Hendon to do a deep dive just to figure out if nothing else, to figure out what he's going to work on. I think Tillman's decisions really, unless it's, you're talking about trying to help your family or something. I think it's purely predicated on what happens with Hendon. I mean, if he doesn't know who's going to be throwing the ball, it's a little bit risky to, come back. If you're a wide receiver, because your stock may not be as good next year. Whereas if Hendon comes back, it could potentially be as good, if not better, the way he continues to blossom.
All right, couple other things to get to football wise. We'll bounce around here a little bit. Let's talk bowl games. I've seen Tennessee and the Tax Slayer, the Music City, even some with the Duke Bowl, the Duke's Mayonnaise Bowl, and Charlotte. I've believed that it was going to be Nashville or Jacksonville. I kind of still tend to lead that direction. What do you guys think where Tennessee's at with the bowls?
I agree. I think that this is I think Tennessee prefers Jacksonville because I think the administration sees a chance for the fans to get to warmer weather, for the team to get to warmer weather. But I think the administration is perfectly comfortable in Nashville and is a nice landing spot if Tennessee does not end up in Jacksonville. I think Charlotte's like still maybe in it, but like they're way down, like percentage wise, I would give that 15-20% of happening. The other ones are, way up from there.
Rob, if you can get Tennessee, Clemson, and Charlotte, does that change where Charlotte's pecking order is?
Wow,
that would for me. I mean, I don't know how fired up Clemson fans. I mean, they would really have to travel. So I mean, I think that would be attractive. I think Tennessee fans are going to show up no matter where the balls are.
Right. Well, I asked Jerome Carvin that on the locker room Sunday night. I asked him, are you a destination guy or are you a matchup guy? And he said he wants to go play somebody that's, a traditional blue blood and go up against a quality opponent. That's more so than going to the beach.
Yeah. And Cade Mays said that he is interested in Nashville. He's more of a Nashville guy than going to a Florida Bowl. So everybody's kind of preferences are different there. I just wonder if you're the SEC, is this a year because all those teams are clumped together and the pecking order is not really the pecking order? Do you look at matchups more if you're the SEC trying to slot guys in bowl games than you do in other years?
I mean, don't you think tickets and hotel rooms are at the top of the list?
Well, but I mean, matchups. I mean, does that mean matchups matter more? Because look, let's face it, a 7-win. I mean, Tennessee fans are excited at 7 wins. Arkansas is excited because they haven't been to a bowl game. How excited is Mississippi State?
Or Georgia, or Florida, or LSU,
or Auburn? You know what I mean? And so,
I totally know what you mean.
Do you look for a TV matchup there because you realize in some of those games, ticket sales aren't exactly going to be balmy. Some of those games aren't going to be, draw the biggest crowds out there, which is a bit unusual for the SEC. So I wonder if matchups factor in a little bit more. South Carolina to the Dukes Bowl makes a lot of sense unless it's Clemson, which they're not going to play in a rematch game. So where they land on the ACC side of things may dictate a little bit of what SEC team ends up in that Charlotte Bowl. So we'll see. Going to be some crazy meetings this week with bowl executives, and certainly a wild Sunday afternoon to try to get all of that slotted out. All of that's going on. The transfer portal is out of control at this point in time, and recruiting is going on. Austin, we'll start with the transfer stuff. Jahmyr Gibbs, we've said that we think Tennessee would be a factor in that. He's going in the portal. It's not official, but he's announced that he's in the portal, just waiting on the finalization of the paperwork. Feels like Tennessee could be heavily involved there. Other transfers at this point, I think it's too early to say that Tennessee's heavily involved in this guy or that guy.
Well, it is, I think that's pretty accurate. I think Tennessee is going to want to be a major player with Jahmyr Gibbs. We'll see what happens. Do they get a meeting with Zach Evans? Do they become a player there? It's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. Obviously, Tennessee would love to add one of those guys from the portal. The big thing is just not adding just a body, adding a quality body, and players like that are really, really, really good. So that's kind of where I'm at, is just you see where it kind of goes. Like I think it was Navy guy 44 that brought up Trey Turner's name. Like if he went in the portal, or James Mitchell went in the portal from Virginia Tech, either one of those guys, because they know Hendon, they played with Hendon, they've been successful where they've been, they would make sense. That not every guy makes sense just because they have a tie to Heupel or whatever, but there are some that make more sense than others. So if some of those Virginia Tech guys went in the portal and Hendon was coming back, to me that would make sense if Hendon jives with them. Again, I have no idea what their camaraderie is, but if he jived with them, I think obviously Tennessee would be crazy not to give him a look, just because that gives him somebody he knows to throw to.
Rob, I was just going to say, you can't pull a Pruitt from 3 or 4 years ago and take a bunch of dead weight.
Yeah,
that's right.
And I think that's the challenge. Isn't that the challenge, Rob, for coaches? Not necessarily dead weight, but to sit there and go, how do I balance priority in a transfer versus a high school kid when there's so many guys available out there in the transfer portal? You've had some success. Do you have to be careful that you don't get some fool's gold, or you're not grasping at something that might ultimately end up being unrealistic or unhelpful?
In talking to my basketball guys, last spring it was the wild, wild west. The first time for the 1-year transfer rule, everybody's on the general's quarters at Tennessee going after this guy. I bet in the end, they seriously pursued probably less than half a dozen guys. And here's why: because the first question that they ask, I think the first question any good coach asks, is, why is that kid leaving? And a lot of times, it's not somebody you want to bring into your locker room.
Yeah, it's true. But this year in football, with the carousel going on right now, a lot of guys are leaving because of coaching changes. Now we'll see how many of them follow Lincoln Riley out to Southern Cal, and where LSU lands, and some of these other things. It may change some of that, but some of these guys are leaving just because there's a coaching change. I think the transfer portal, it's going to be interesting to me, bigger picture here. If Lincoln Riley gets 10 guys, 7 guys, whatever, from Oklahoma, 5, 6 guys from Oklahoma, does the NCAA look at putting some kind of qualifier out there that says basically you can't follow your coach to another school?
Yeah, that happens in high school. That happened with Boris Crouch over in Charlotte, Rob. I mean, because ultimately, like, what's stopping Caleb Williams from going with Lincoln Riley or whatever, like any player, and not just quarterback. It can be any position. It's something that I think that it won't change, in my opinion, until you see 2 or 3 of these top dominoes fall where it looks just kind of fishy.
Rob,
you won't see it until the Alabama assistant gets a head coaching job and they have 6 guys like the program.
Maybe. I mean, I know there's a lot of course, everybody in Oklahoma is angry right now. There's a lot of conspiracies out there with the fact that he was recruiting California as much as he has been and has the commits there. And I'm not talking about the commits, but we'll see how many guys follow him out there.
I mean, don't you think it would be hard to institute that, Hubbard?
I mean, but we're talking about a place that, we're talking about it, and maybe it is now impossible, but it's not far removed that you could put a qualifier in that, hey, you can't go play, at a school you're going to play, during your college career, and you got to go X number of miles from home and some different crazy things like that. I think with the one-time transfer and immediate eligibility, I think it's hard, but if a program's gutted, that's going to be an eye opener for some people. If blue blood gets gutted, that's going to catch some people's attention. So we'll see. Again, I think that's a big picture, not this year, multiple years, potentially moving down the road, something that might show up or might not show up. We'll have to see. I'm bouncing around here. Rob, basketball, Tennessee did not play very well on Friday. Back at it, in another what looks like to be a tune-up game. What do you need to see from this Tennessee team on Tuesday night or later tonight against a team that they should manhandle?
Just a little more consistency. And I don't make anything of the Tennessee Tech game at all because, I mean, kids are off campus, no students are there. It's a 3:00 game on, the Friday after Thanksgiving. And I mean, that kind of stuff just happens in college basketball. I mean, kids don't play their best every time out, especially, in these games that don't have a lot of intensity against a small non-conference school. But with as many veterans as they have, I think you'd like to see less of that. Because, I mean, they should be kind of like what we saw from the football team on Saturday for the past 2 weeks. They didn't need a crowd, a big crowd, a big opponent, all that to get up and play good out of the gate. So I would just like to see a little more intensity and execution early on than we saw. And that, again, that's just because, Kennedy Chandler's a freshman, but outside of that, everybody else who is playing big minutes out of the gate has played a lot of basketball for you.
How much better has the Ziegler kid been than you thought?
A lot. I mean, I kind of Rick was so high on him in the preseason that I sort of had some expectations, but he's been that way in the past about right. some guys, and it didn't really translate. I mean, a lot of times I think he falls in love with the kid's attitude, work ethic, and that influences his view of their overall ability. But with Ziegler, it's pretty legit. He didn't shoot the ball great the other day. He was 1 of 6, but he was still really effective. He had 4 assists, 19 minutes. I don't think he had a turnover. And the combo of him and Kennedy, I think it's pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see more and more of that combo as well. Now, what's Barnes' rotation going to look like? As I don't think he's got it figured out yet. Do you?
I promise you, he doesn't. He 100% doesn't. I like the kid. I don't mean to hate on him, but it'd be hard to justify giving Kennedy or Victor Bailey 20 minutes a game like he's getting right now. And I guess part of that was because Powell was out on Friday. He's ill. But when Justin Powell's back, it would be hard for me to play Victor Bailey that much. And I'd like to see a little more Brandon Huntley outfield personally. He played 20 minutes on Friday. I could stand to see that number go up.
We'll see what Tennessee's basketball team looks like if they start a game and play a first half of a basketball game against the team that they're supposed to manhandle the way that they should play it. That I think that's what Rick Barnes, as Rob you mentioned, is looking for tonight. We'll see if Tennessee can line up and play that way against a team that they should certainly handle for sure. Again, I'm bouncing around all over the place here. Back to the coaching stuff. It feels like that Josh Heupel is down the list at Oklahoma, if he's on the list at all at this point. Are you surprised that Heupel hasn't said anything about the Oklahoma job?
If he says something, then like it makes it look like I don't know, like there. If I said, guys, I'm not going to ESPN, everybody would laugh you out of the room. No one's hiring you at ESPN. It's one of those catch-22s. You know what I mean? Like, I think that if you don't want to give it too much credence, but you also don't want it to hurt you out there with schools going, hey, so did you see that? He might go to Oklahoma. Why are you looking at Tennessee? I mean, like, it's one of those balancing acts.
And if he's not being contacted and Tennessee fans are just making a tempest in a teapot, then he looks pretty pompous from the Oklahoma side. We know you're not coming here. We haven't even called you.
Right. Yeah. So we'll see where Oklahoma lands. Obviously, a lot of Brent Venables there.
In that vein, how brilliant was Lincoln Riley post game the other night, assuring everybody he was not going to be the head coach at LSU?
Pretty good. He didn't lie. Austin, let's deep dive into recruiting here and talk about Tennessee. Out on the road, Josh Heupel, a couple of in-home visits to get the week started. Elijah Herring, that's a pretty good one to make. His brother's pretty good too. Get that one going. And then obviously out in Memphis as well. Not surprising to me that he's worked in-state out to start this week. Is it you?
No, I mean, even when he went out on the road during the football season, he was going out in state. So, not surprised at all to see him start here. Elijah Herring, then Cody Jones and Cam Miller on Monday. And so the Cody Jones thing, Tennessee's trying to battle Michigan there. Michigan's made a push after Tennessee kind of surged. And then, of course, Michigan's big win last week doesn't necessarily help things. So that obviously, is something that Tennessee's going to have to battle over the next, couple of weeks as Tennessee tries to get him in for an official visit potentially this weekend. And then, land him come a week and a half from now.
What do we think? I know the official visit list is not done. What do we think? 3, 4 this weekend? Something like that? 5?
Yeah. I think there's a chance, Mba, the kid, from France. Yeah, I mean, you're looking at maybe a couple of JUCO DBs, Walter Nolan potentially, just different names that'll be bannered about, and we'll see. Sometimes these things get pushed back a week, and then some guys that potentially could be trying to go next weekend and they're getting pushed into this weekend. So early in the week to deep dive it too much.
Yeah, certainly is the case. I mean, balancing it, we talked about the transfer portal, balancing those things. You've mentioned running backs, the need for running backs. Does the high school running back recruitment change if Tennessee could get a Gibbs or an Evans? Does that change a lot of what they're doing running back recruiting, or is not necessarily that much?
No, I mean, Justin Williams is going to be, if Justin Williams wants in, he's going to be in. And then Tennessee could go in the portal for another back, or could go the high school ranks for another back. But ultimately, I think Tennessee's at least taking 2 more backs, 3 total.
Yeah, 3 total that's what I was getting at. 3 total in this class when all said and done. Some people have asked about a couple names. The Caldwell kid from up in Michigan. Does that feel like Michigan State, with the success they've had, Tennessee not trending there as much as they were early on?
And then he's a candidate to visit potentially this weekend.
Okay. So not done there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly feels like there's less traction there now. Tim Banks is still swinging, but it feels like there's less traction. But again, he gets back down here for a visit. All that can change.
But it feels like Tennessee's got a good bit of momentum because of the success that they've had on the field and getting some kids. I mean, you got the Joseph kid, you got Harrison in on Monday night to jump in.
Yes.
It feels like there's a little bit of juice rolling in Tennessee's favor. They got a little more life about them in recruiting than what they'd had.
That's 100% correct.
Where is the priorities? Obviously remain on defense for Tennessee, pass rushers, secondary,
pass rushers. If they could get the right kind of linebacker, they would go that route. On offense, they would take a running back or 2. Take Caleb Webb. They can get him the wide receiver from McKeitern down in Atlanta. So that's kind of it right now.
A lot of moving parts, though. Lots of things going on. Obviously, you got lots of things going on the coaching front around the country that could change things. The transfer portal changing things by the hour, it seems like, as well. So it's the dawn of a new day in the month of December, when everybody thinks everything's done, kind of in a nice little bow. There's a lot of wrinkles to jump out as coaches are on the road here with visits coming up, and obviously all the potential news of the transfer portal. We'll continue to follow all of it for you. We'll give you all the updates we can on where Tennessee's been, who's coming in, who's expected to come in, how those visits went. You know how we cover recruiting on the site. We're going to continue to cover it that way, even as chaotic as it might be. We're going to cover it like crazy. The big quarterback Tennessee had in, I'm not going to mention his name. Even though that's a year ahead from now, you are hearing Tennessee kind of mentioned with some more bigger name kids in the 23 class, higher ranked kids, Austin, even on both sides of the ball when you look at things.
Yeah, obviously, it helps that they, Caleb Herring's been up here 400 times with Elijah. But I mean, you look at him on defense, you look at Carnell Tate that was in this weekend, had a really good time, the kid from IMG. Nico obviously had a phenomenal time and will be back. So, yeah, I mean, Tennessee is more of a factor in 23 than they were in 22, just based off of the length of the relationships that they've been able to cultivate since Josh Heupel and this staff have been here. And then they're still swinging on some 22s. I mean, they've not give up hope on some kids, and they're still swinging, and we'll see where it goes.
Yep, getting Victor Burley in last week for the Vanderbilt game.
That's right.
Big time defensive lineman from the state of Georgia. Was big for Rodney Garner and big for that side of the ball as well. So we'll cover all that for you and keep you up to date on everything that is going on, all things Tennessee football, basketball, and obviously recruiting. That's going to do it for this edition of the Smoky Mountain Organics Volquest.com podcast. For Rob Lewis and Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.
You've been listening to the Volquest podcast every week here on Volquest.